All right, well, welcome everybody to a multi-chapter virtual meeting that we're having today. It's co-hosted with Connecticut, Northern New England, and Rhode Island. I'd like to welcome everybody today, and we have our special guest, Eddie Vidal, is going to speak to us about from couch potato to industry leader. So I'm going to start off with a few chapter updates and then move into some HDI business for the entire organization. Starting off with updates about Connecticut, they're having a couple of meetings. September 23rd, Roy Atkinson will be speaking about the future help desk and desktop support. October 21st, they have Mark Thompson with cybersecurity. And December 9th, they're going to do their Analyst and Desktop of the Year award meeting. Then New England chapter, on September 28th, we are going to have Matt Hooper from Landesk speaking about the effect of cloud services on ITSM and ITAM processes and support. And then in December, we're looking to have our award banquet as well. Northern New England has a familiar name up on the screen again. September 22nd, Roy Atkinson is going to be speaking in Manchester about serving your customers well, channels and choices. And then on December 8th, they're having their award meeting in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And then finally, Rhode Island doesn't have any events scheduled right now, but they are planning on a membership appreciation event as well as a few other things. And if you'd like to help them, please reach out. And actually, that goes for all of the chapters as well. If you are interested in helping out with your chapter, reach out, let us know. We're always looking for people who want to help for one meeting or to join a board or interested in helping out in some way. Even hosting a meeting helps. And we'll talk a little bit more about Fusion in a little bit here. Just wanted to give a mention that that is coming up in November. So some HDI updates, membership. As you see, it's now more connected than ever. We have something new called connect.thinkhdi.com where you can connect and collaborate with professionals who share your goals and challenges and gain exclusive access to the best industry resources handpicked by experts and practitioners. And it's a really great place. I don't know if you've been on the site yet, but it comes, it's included with your HDI membership, and it's a really good resource. A lot of good collaboration going on there. I see a lot of, people bouncing ideas off each other or, telling us about ideas that they've had. There was a really good post on there today or last night about, a test that someone was giving to applicants for their service desk, and I thought that was a really interesting read. So head on over to connect.thinkhdi.com if you're a member, and if you're not, you can join up. HDI forum roundtables are coming up. There's 2 of them that are free to attend in the near future. September 20th, there will be a virtual event. And then on October 31st, right before Fusion in Las Vegas, they're having one as well. And you can register on thinkhdi.com/roundtables. And as I said, Fusion's coming up November 1st through the 4th, including some pre-conference sessions before that. This will be held at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, and you can currently save $200 with an early bird discount up until September 9th. It's co-hosted between HDI and ITSMF USA, and you can be a member of either and save $200. Sounds like somebody may have unmuted themselves if they could do that. There's a couple of certifications coming up. The KCS certified Foundation online certification is on sale for $195, and you can save several $100s if you register by August 31st. And then there's a new award called the HDI Team Certified Award, Pinnacle of Excellence. If you get 100% of your team HDI certified and cement your status among the Support Center Elite with a new HDI Team Certified Pinnacle of Excellence Award. And you can apply today if you've already got 100% of your team certified. And then a lot of you are probably already familiar with this, but the new HDI membership model, it's one price for everyone. thinkhdi.com/membership will have more information, but it's essentially one membership level for everyone for $295, which if you go to at least 1 or 2 conferences a year, you'll probably get that money back. And then also, don't forget, upcoming October 31st is the deadline for the Robert Half Technology Sponsored Analyst of the Year, Desktop Support Technician of the Year, and Manager of the Year awards. And to submit nominations or to encourage people in your area to submit nominations, you can do that at thinkhdi.com/awards. And now I'd like to introduce our featured speaker. Please welcome Eddie Vidal. He's got 25 years of experience in information technology, focusing on service delivery and support for IT infrastructures and operations. He's currently an independent consultant for the Scripps Research Institute, and he was previously manager of the UMIT Service Desk at the University of Miami. Eddie, as you may know, is a founding member and president emeritus of the South Florida HDI local chapter. He's a member of the HDI Strategic Advisory Board and a past member of the Member Advisory Board. And he's actually an original member of the Desktop Support Advisory Board and a former regional director of the HDI Southeast region. He's presented at the HDI conference in Fusion and is actually the chair of the Service Desk Foundations track at the HDI conference in Washington, D.C. next spring. He's also published in HDI Support World magazine and is also actively involved with ITSMF. He is actually the host and podcast jockey of the ITSMF monthly podcast. Eddie is also the award winner of the 2014 ITSMF South Region Member of the Year Award, the 2014 ITSMF President's Award. He was inducted this past spring in the HDI Hall of Fame inaugural class, and his alma mater is Florida International University. He's got a number of ITIL and HDI certifications. I had to cut out a lot of stuff on this list because he's a very well-accomplished person and an excellent speaker. I'd like to introduce Eddie Vidal. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Let me go ahead and request control, or wait, share my screen.
Yep, that's right. And if anyone has questions during this, you can just type them into the chat window on Adobe Connect.
Well, thanks for that intro. And I look at all those things that you put up there because I didn't give you that slide, and I go, man, that's a lot of things. And I'm thinking to myself, as a couch potato, how did I get to that point? Because years ago, I never in my wildest dreams did I think things like this would happen. And I really felt it all started when I went to my first HDI conference. I think it was 8 to 10 years ago. And then I became a local chapter officer and started the South Florida chapter. And I always think that, couch potato, did I ever want to be successful? Because we all have these dreams to be successful, but a lot of times I had these fears. And I don't know if this ever happens to anybody, but fear of being successful. And I look at the term of couch potato, or the definition, and it's like someone that sits on the couch and watches TV. But that was in my day. And nowadays, it's people that are just playing those video games or going through a Netflix binge watching some type of show. So that's my story. And the reason that I put this together is it's interesting, and I'll talk about this throughout the presentation, is I have a tendency to get myself in trouble by when they ask me to volunteer, I say yes. You guys had asked me about this in Summit to say, hey, would you present for us? And I mean, I didn't even have to think twice about it. I said yes. And this is where I think it helps me reach a certain level. So before I get started, one of the things that I always talk about is my family. I'm here presenting, and there's people that have dialed in, and they're taking their time to listen to my story. And it's like, well, who is this guy, and what experience does he bring, and is he a leader, and what has he done in the past? Well, to me, it all starts at the house. I'm a leader of my household. I'm a leader of 6 kids. Alyssa's missing from this picture because it's hard to get 6 kids in one room to take a picture.
Eddie, sorry to interrupt. I don't think your slides have started presenting yet, so I don't know if you can stop and restart the sharing of your desktop because we're not seeing anything yet.
Okay, let's see.
Sorry about that.
All right, so share. Okay.
Yep, there it is.
Okay, so let me go back to the slideshow. So basically all you missed is the cover page, and here's my first slide. So you haven't missed any slides. So can you see that now okay, David?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. I'm not looking at the chat window because it's taking up my entire screen. So if anybody's doing any chatting or you need to interrupt me for questions, please go ahead. So talking about my family is one of the things is that this is what It's interesting. As a leader in an organization, there's a lot of the similar things that happen where you lead your team, but there's a lot of things that I lead at home. As young adults, I've already passed the phase about trying to guide them and telling them what to do. And they're all, the youngest is 20, and it's more, the relationship is more about mentoring and giving them strategies and ways to be successful in their life and their career as adults. And a lot of the same things I do at the office. So a lot of the lessons that I take that I've learned at the house, I'm also going to share with you today, the lessons that I've learned throughout my career. And lesson number one is take education seriously. Well, why do I say that? It took me 20 years to graduate from college. I did not take school seriously. I started in my IT industry at a young age, and I started moving up the ladder, and I started getting promotions, and I was making decent money. And I go, you know what? I don't need to finish school. And then the year 2000 came, and the internet bubble or the technology bubble burst, and I had moved around from job to job. One of the things, I'm not a really big risk taker, but in my career, I happened to move from jobs every 5 years, and I went to a small consulting company, and unfortunately, that didn't work out, and I was laid off. I was laid off at the time with 3 kids. They were 8, 7, and 5 years old, and I go, what am I going to do now? So back in those days, you didn't have LinkedIn and Facebook where you can reach out to thousands of individuals and say, hey, I'm looking for a job. It wasn't that easy. It was knocking on the doors. It was having meetings with individuals. It was having lunch sessions. And anytime I would meet with someone, one of the first questions they would ask me is, well, Eddie, do you have your degree? My answer was no. Well, you're in technology. Well, how about any certifications? Do you have any of those? Unfortunately, my answer was no. So I didn't get my first job interview for 6 months. And I got that interview and I got that job, and my salary was 50% less than what I was making at the time. And I learned a lot of valuable lessons during that time. It's like, okay, well, if this ever happens to me again, I need to do something about it, and I need to take education seriously. So I will talk a little bit about what I've done throughout my career to get to the point where I'm at today. Lesson number 2 is find a mentor. I always say that I surround myself with smarter people. I am not the smartest guy in the room, and I learn from other individuals. As you progress in your career, you've learned a lot of things that you can take back and you can give. So if you're a mentor right now, I'm sure that you get some value from it. And if you're not a mentor, I'm going to challenge you and I'm going to ask you why. What are you waiting for? And for those of you that have a mentor, it's not a one-way street. It's not like they're going to be reaching out to you and saying, hey, come here, David, I'm going to mentor you today. It's a two-way street. You need to reach out. And if you don't have a mentor, you need to find one. Because for me, I've used mentors in several ways. So I've presented at national conferences before, and I find people that I trust and that are honest, and I ask them to give me feedback. So the first time that I presented at the HDI National Conference was in 2010. And I had some people in the audience that I go, hey, look, listen, I need you to give me some really good feedback. And I got people that sat down with me and talked to me for an hour. I had somebody that gave me 2 pages of notes. And some of it was hard to swallow. But that's the only way that I was going to get better. Every time that I want to go ahead and write an article, I look for people that can edit my article. And nothing bothers me more than if after this presentation, if you come back to me and say, hey, Eddie, you did a good job. Well, good's not good enough for me. And I would challenge you, and I usually do this in person. I would challenge you and say, well, what was so good about it? What did you learn from it? Or what could I have done better? That's what I'm looking for in a mentor. And if you're starting your career and you're early in your career, if you need to find someone that can mentor you. And it doesn't have to be somebody that works in your organization, because for me, it's been difficult to find those individuals. For me, most of my mentors have actually been within HDI or within ITSMF. One of the other things that I used to do is when I worked at the University of Miami, I was transferred to another department, and I ran the service desk at the medical campus for 3 years. And when I first started there, it was a brand new organization for me. I didn't really know anybody, and I had a team of about 15 people reporting to me. And then I would start meeting with them on a one-on-one basis, and I would ask them about, well, what are your goals? What is it that you want to do in your career? Do you have a resume? Do you have a LinkedIn profile? And they would look at me, and they would go, well, what is this guy trying to do? Is he trying to get me out of here? So if that's the thought process that they had at that time, then where do you think the trust factor was? So I had to gain their trust. And the reason I would ask all these questions is because I wanted them to progress in their career. I wanted them to move forward. I wanted them to continue to grow in their career and hopefully go to another position and another job within the organization. Of course, I didn't want them leaving the University of Miami, but I wanted them to grow. And I felt that one of my strengths was to help them and share with them all the mistakes that I've made, but also to help them grow and become better in their careers. Lesson number 3, love what you do. You need to be passionate about your job. I remember when I first started in school, I studied accounting and I studied finance, and it just didn't work out for me. I hated it. And I know a couple of my jobs early in my career, it was like I was looking at the clock and I was thinking to myself, okay, when is this day going to end? And I remember getting into technology by accident. I remember my dad way back when having an IBM Mod 30, and I know that I'm dating myself. And he'd come and he'd say, hey, Eddie, come here, take a look at this. And I remember after a couple minutes, I would say, hey, Dad, are you done yet? Because I didn't really have that love and passion. Now, I always ask this, when I've done this presentation in the past, I'll ask this question about your current situation or your current job. If I were to come to you and say, David, I'll use you for an example, and I know that you're moving to a new position, but if I came to you and said, hey, for whatever role you have in your organization right now, and whatever you're doing, if I were to say, hey, I'm going to give you $10,000 a year more in salary, but nothing changes, everything still stays the same, my next question to you would be okay, well, would you work harder? And some people would answer that and say, hey, yes, I would. But then I would challenge you and say, well, really? Well, you may, but that may be short term, because right now you probably are working just as hard as you normally would for whatever salary you get. And granted, that this is for salaried positions, not sales, because I understand sales are incentivized and you make more when you sell more. But I think money motivates everyone. In my opinion, not really. And I have this discussion. I think certain things like money, a nice office, and job security can help people from becoming less motivated. But usually that doesn't help people to become more motivated. I think a key goal is to understand the motivations of each of your employees. For example, my daughter, she was working at this store. It's a retail store called Cotton On. And I'm really proud of her. She's 20 years old, and she's worked hard, and she has moved from one department store to another. And they reached out to her and said, hey, we want you to come back to the store, and we want you to be a key holder. A key holder means that they get to open and close the store, and they're responsible for the money and the cash. And she called me up. She goes, Dad, what do you think I should do? I think I'm only going to do this if they give me more money. And I go, oh, come on, Alex. I go, let's think about this. I go, why do you think they're asking you about this? I go, you must be doing some really good work, and they respect you, and they value the work that you're doing. They're asking you to come to this new store and to help them out. And eventually money will play a part in this, but not at this moment. You go there and you do it. And so I urge and I recommend anybody that gets a chance to be promoted to another department or another role, a lot of times you're not going to get money for that move. But you have to think long term, and hopefully when you go to this new position like she would learn more things and she would learn more skills. I mean, there's a couple people on this call right now that are HDI local chapter officers. And why do they do this? Because I guarantee you they're not doing it for the money, because they're not getting paid anything. I mean, you do it because, David, you get to do host this meeting. You all and the group that put this webinar together was able to work on doing social media promotion, email campaigns, getting me as a speaker. There's a lot of skills that you don't get to do or work on in your own job. So volunteering, whether it's becoming an HDI officer or doing something else, you pick up some new skills that you can bring into your career. And the one thing that I would share with you is that find something that you do well, something that you enjoy, and something that you do better than anyone, and the money will come later. And the other thing is that when you're in an organization, try to find those weaknesses in an organization where you can go in there and you can help and you can be that missing piece where you're dependent on. Those are the things that are going to get you ahead in your career. Here's another example. For those of you that were around in 1996, and I were to tell you about Microsoft Encarta. If you don't know what Microsoft Encarta is, it was a Microsoft product many years ago that put an encyclopedia on CDs and DVDs. So this was before the internet. And even before that, if you're old enough to remember, there would be salespeople that would knock on your door selling you encyclopedias. But Microsoft put this all into an environment for CDs or DVDs, and they had a big team of individuals. They had project managers, they had developers, they spent lots of millions of dollars to put this together. And if I were to tell you in 1996, oh, you're spending all that money, I'll bet you later on in life, people are going to do this for free. You'd probably look at me and say I'm crazy. But look where we are today. What's Wikipedia? That's free. People that are doing that are doing this for free. There's other examples of that. Red Hat, Linux. There's a lot of software products out there. There's a lot of things that people do for free. They do it because they're passionate about it, and they're not doing it about the money. It's not all about the money. Lesson number 4, create a draft. Well, you look at this piece of paper with all this red line, and it's not one of my old drafts. It's something that I found online, so don't read into it more than it is. But the reason that I put this up is because in the past, when I was given a job or a project or a paper or a process that I needed to put together, I would work on it all by myself. I would create this draft and I'd put the final product and I would turn it in, and I thought, man, this is great work. I was really happy with my work. And what would happen? I would get something back like this. My boss would go and say, hey, look, I'm looking for this. You didn't meet what I was looking for here. I need you to change this a little bit. And I would get frustrated. And I thought, you know what? Why would this happen? And it was a wake-up call for me to say, hey, look, I can't work in a silo. I can't work by myself. When I'm trying to put something together, I need to get other people involved. I need to work as a team. I can't run rogue and I can't do this on my own. I need to ask for feedback. And so now when I'm given something to do, I try to grab as much information as I can from the individual that's tasking me with this. But I also start with just a one-paper draft, and I keep communication with the individual that asked me to do this. And then I also go back and I see if I can involve other people. So now that I'm in a position to tell people, hey, I need something from you, I try to keep it simple. I start with, hey, give me a one-pager. And I give them a deadline of a couple days or the end of the week, and then we go through that draft. Because no matter how clearly I communicate what's in my mind or what vision I have, or if I put it together or put something on paper, they may not understand exactly what I'm looking for. And so I make sure that I work with them. David, I see that there's some questions in there. I don't know if we want to go to them, or do you want me to keep on going?
You can keep on going here. We're figuring out how to mute lines.
Okay. Lesson number 5, communicate, communicate, communicate. Well, I always say in IT, we're the best communicators in the world. And that's me being sarcastic, because I think that we have a lot of room for improvement. I'm going to give you an example. When I was at the University of Miami, we merged all our service desks into one: technical, clinical, and academic support. And we had different sites, and we merged into one location, and we had different call menu trees, and we decided to create one call menu tree. And so when we were putting that all together, that project took us a long time and there was a lot of work involved. And I knew it was going to involve some changes that impacted the customer. So I go to my senior management, I go, I think that we need to communicate these changes. And they came back and said, no, this is something internal. When they call the number, don't worry, they'll figure it out. And I continued to tell them, hey, look, I'm not sure I agree with you. I think that we need to communicate this, at least put something out, share what the new call menu and the options are, maybe share what the reason for it and what the value is behind it. And I lost that battle. So we went ahead with the changes, and then I started running some metrics. And little by little, I would share with them on a weekly basis what our number one call volume was. And guess what it was? It was wrong number, or they were calling the wrong option. And then they came back to me and say, well, Eddie, what are you doing about it? And I just had to shake my head and say, well, what do you mean? I go, I think one of the reasons that we're getting these calls is because we didn't communicate what we needed to do. And finally, I don't want to talk bad, but it's like, okay, well, yeah, let's do that. They saw the light, and better late than never, we started communicating our changes. And how did we do that? We created flyers. We had Yammer, and we put some messages on Yammer. We put something on our webpage. We put flyers in the elevator. And little by little, I think that I saw those numbers go down because that's how we communicated. And maybe it was after the fact, but at least we did. Here's another example about communication. When a new movie comes out, what type of communication happens there? They just don't release the movie. There's a media blitz leading up to that. There's social media, there's hashtags that are created, there's 30, 60, or 90-second movie trailers for you to get an idea of what this movie's about. There's magazine articles, the actors are on shows being interviewed. There's a lot of communication going on prior to a meeting. So the same thing could be said about this webinar for this HDI meeting that we're having here today. How many communications went out? I know David sends out an email, or the team did. I know that there was some social media stuff going on. I know that I posted some things on social media. So when you're trying to do something, whether it's a meeting or whether it's a project, there's no difference. You need to communicate to your customers. You're going to have to share what's going on and also share what the value is. You need to ensure that you're partnering with the business and providing what value it is that you're rolling out XYZ product and why you're doing it and what the value is behind it. Lesson number 6 that I've learned along the way is metrics stop the hearsay from those who scream the loudest. Well, you may ask, well, what does that mean? Well, it depends on the organization that you're at. And I've been in several. And I remember when I first started in XYZ organization, I would go in there and I would start putting some dashboards and some metrics together. And they would look at me and they go, well, where are you getting this data from? And some of the examples that I would come up with is when we were doing some customer surveys, the responses were, oh, the desktop support team is too slow, or they're not communicating with us. And so when I shared that with the director of desktop, they just looked at me and they didn't believe me, because this was an individual that had been in this organization for a long time and they had done things a certain way. And these are the individuals that would challenge things like that, and they would say, and I say it screamed the loudest because they would get the most results. And little by little, I started sharing some metrics and saying, hey, look, this is not the fact here. This is not the case. This is what our customers are really saying. So they would start asking me, well, I don't believe you. And I'd look at them and I go, seriously? I go, here's the data, and I'd have to show them. So I was able to quiet those screamers. I hate it when I'm at the service desk now and I hear, oh, you guys are getting killed with calls, or doctors are calling about certain things. And I would say, well, really? I go, well, can you give me some incident numbers? Because our call volume is normal. And so those that, I don't know how to say it is, but these are the individuals that it's all like talk, and it's not to shut them down, but to me, numbers speak louder. And to me, it adds a lot of value and it goes a long way. But the same goes in reverse. A lot of times, my team members at the service desk they always say, well, this department is not working well with us, and they're kicking back a lot of incidents, and they're saying that we're not providing the right information that they need when we escalate these calls. And I always question them, and I go, well, give me some examples. Give me an incident number. I mean, how am I going to fix these issues? I mean, a perfect example is that in a past organization, we rolled out Microsoft Outlook to 15,000 students. And so the next day, you can expect some calls. And an individual at the service desk came and said, hey, we're getting killed with calls. And I go, well, really? I go, well, where's the proof? And somebody goes, Eddie, can you run a report? And out of those 15,000 students that were impacted, we only had 15 calls. So that's what I mean about metrics stop the hearsay. It's like, give me some numbers, give me some data, give me some examples where I can show you that, hey, look, these metrics mean something, and the story that you're sharing and the rumors that you're sharing are really not accurate. Lesson number 7, failure is an option. Who here has not failed? I learn more from my failures than I do from my successes. And here's a question that I always ask in one of my job interviews for people that I bring in. I ask them, what's the biggest mistake you've ever made? But more importantly, what have you learned from it? And a lot of times I get silence. And then you may wonder, well, why am I asking this question? I want to find out what risks an individual has taken. I want to find out what kind of mistakes they've made. For me, this is their time to brag, to say, you know what? I did something wrong, but here's what I learned from it, and I've become a better worker because of that. And you may ask, well, Eddie, have you failed? I go, I failed many times, and let me share a story with you. I was a service desk manager at the University of Miami, and we had quarterly all-staff meetings. And I remember in one of these meetings, and every quarter I would have different individuals on the team attend this meeting. And I remember John coming up to me and saying, hey, Eddie, who's going to this meeting? And nobody really volunteered. So I go, hey, John, why don't you go to this meeting? And maybe I asked one other individual to go. So this meeting was at 2 o'clock, and we were there. And then I come back the next day, and I look at the stats. And our abandon rate went crazy at around 2 o'clock. And it's not because of all these people that went to the meeting. I had 3 individuals on the team go to lunch at the same time. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness. And I didn't really get mad. I go, how can I make this into a teaching moment? And so I walk out to the floor where the team is, and some of them were on calls, and then little by little they get off the calls, and I told them, hey, listen, I need to talk to you. And I start off and I go, I have failed. I have failed you. And they look at me. I go, I have failed you because yesterday we had this team meeting, and 3 of you decided to go to lunch at the same time. And if I look at the stats, we had about a 30% abandon rate, or 30-something% abandon rate at that time. And I go, I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at myself because I did not share with you my expectations. My expectations are that this is a team effort. And the thing is, I look at everybody that did this, and you're only worried about your four walls or your cubicle, and you're worried about nothing else. You're not thinking about the bigger picture. You're not thinking about the team, and you're not thinking about the customer. And I go, and one day, hopefully, you're going to be leading a team. And I would hate for something like this to happen to you. So yeah, I have failed because my expectations is that you need to think about just not your calls, but you need to think about your other team members and what your actions and what you do and how that's going to impact the organization and your customer. So I think after that lesson, and I didn't yell at them and I didn't get mad, and I go, look, the lesson is that we need to think bigger. We just can't think about ourselves. And as future meetings happen, I think they got the picture, because then I saw a lot more collaboration. I saw people working at their lunches. I saw people not taking breaks when we were having team meetings. So it's interesting. Some of us are not ready to admit our mistakes or our failures. And my oldest son, I always ask him, because he's at this stage right now that, and I remember myself being at that stage that I know it all and I never make mistakes. And I go, Anthony, so share with me, what's the last mistake you made? And his response is, well, I'm perfect, Dad. And I know that he's not ready for this conversation yet. And maybe there's individuals in your organization that are afraid to admit that they've made mistakes. but you got to develop a trusting environment for them to be able to fail, because at least they're trying and they're taking those risks. Here are some other examples of failure, and I love this quote. And it's, failure provides you with a great opportunity to decide how much you really want something. Will you give up, or will you dig deeper, commit more, and work harder, learn, and get better? If you know this is what you truly want, you'll be willing to pay the price that success requires. You will be willing to fail again and again and again in order to succeed. I mean, there's stories out there about Walt Disney getting fired before he started Disney World. I have other things here that Oprah Winfrey also got fired from her television show. There's other people that have failed many, many times before they've been successful. I mean, here's another example. Michael Jordan missed 9,000 shots, lost 300 games. 26 times he was trusted to take the winning shot and he missed. He's failed over and over again, but that's why he's been successful. So don't be afraid to fail. And if you're in an environment that you're afraid to take those risks, well, you need to do something about it. You need to talk to your boss to try to get to that point where you feel comfortable in order to be able to do some of these things. And the thing is, it's not to fail over and over again, because the most important thing about failure is what you learn from it. Lesson number 8, get noticed when you make a bad call. Well, what does that mean? If you look at the picture on this slide, I'm not sure if you follow football, but let me explain to you what happened here. This was a Monday night football game between the Green Bay Packers and the Seattle Seahawks. And the referees there's one guy on the right. He has both of his hands raised up, calling this a touchdown. And the individual on the left has his hands to the side, calling this a touchback, which a touchback means that the defense got the ball, and then they take the ball to the 20-yard line, then it's a turnover. These referees blew the call. These referees were not the real officials. They were replacement officials, because the real officials were having a contract dispute with the National Football League. And this was not the first time that they made a bad call. And so after this game, they worked with the regular referees, and they signed a contract, and they came back to work the following Sunday. And when they walked onto that field, they got a standing ovation for coming back to work. So ever in your IT career, when you've walked into a meeting or something, have you ever received a standing ovation? More than likely you haven't. And why am I sharing this story with you? Because what happens in sports is you only notice the referees and the umpires and the officials when they make a mistake. And think about that. How much different is that in our careers? How often do we get recognized, or do they hear about us when we make a bad mistake, or we make a bad call, or when a system is down, or when something that we were supposed to deliver to a customer wasn't done? So the thing is that it's not all about, hey, I mean, yes, we do get recognized when we make bad calls or bad moves, or we bring systems down, but that's not really the point of the story. It's like we need to recognize the individuals that work hard every day. We need to praise them. I know that for the customer service industry, we have Customer Service Week, the first week of October, I think. I go, we need to praise our individuals. We can't just always bring them into a room to tell them all the things that they're not doing well. We need to make it a habit to praise them when they're doing well. I mean, how many times, and this is a question that I ask when I do this presentation in person and live. I'll ask this question, I go, well, when's the last time that you were praised? When's the last time that you received a written thank you card or a note? I mean, sometimes we receive emails, but when you receive something in writing, I think it adds a little bit more. And then I ask him the question, I go, well, how did that make you feel? Well, what made him feel great? And where is that card today? And there's many individuals. I remember doing this presentation, and a guy told me that he got praised back in 1981. 1981 was 30-something years ago. And then I asked him this next question, and I didn't think he'd have an answer. I go, well, do you know where that card is today? And I thought he probably lost it or trashed it. He goes, yeah, I have it in my filing cabinet. I go, 30 plus years later, this individual remembers that thank you card. And so look how it made him feel. And so then my question to you, or my challenge to you as a leader, is when's the last time, and maybe a lot of individuals on this call have done this before, but if you haven't, when's the last time you praised somebody that works for you? When's the last time you gave them a thank you card? Because think about how it made you feel, and then put yourself in their shoes. How do you think it's going to make them feel? It's going to make them feel great. So get into the habit of doing that. Lesson number 9, professional development is not between the hours of 9 to 5. If you're in an organization and you're lucky and you're able to train during the day and you're able to go to classes and you're able to take time off to professionally develop yourself, like to come to this webinar or to go to conferences, consider yourself lucky. But there's a lot of us that in order to get ahead in our career, we're going to have to do a lot of our own studying on our own. For those of you that work and go to school, more than likely, you're going to school at night. You're studying on the weekends at night. And if you have a family, it takes time away from your family. When I put this presentation together, do you think I have the ability to do this during 9 to 5 if I'm working for a client or working for an organization as a practitioner? No. I got to do this on my own time. And so if you're in an organization that allows you to do this, feel lucky. Here's another thing to consider. When you're away in some of these conferences, if you're going to the HDI conference or the Fusion conference that David mentioned earlier in this presentation, and you're going for 1 week, well, what are you doing during that 1 week? Are you still answering emails? Are you still responsible for the work that's being done back at your office? For a lot of individuals, yes. But here's a perfect opportunity to be able to take someone on your team and say, hey, look, Joe, I am going to hold you responsible. I want you to cover while I'm gone. And you communicate that to your team that say, hey, while I'm gone, I want you all to reach out to Joe. How do you think Joe's going to feel? I think he's going to feel pretty damn good. I think what's going to happen is that he's going to think that you trust him, that you have enough trust in him to put him in charge of your area while you're gone. And granted, you stay in touch with them and you mentor them, and you, before you leave, you set the expectations. But this is a great way to develop somebody else in their professional career. So in order to take your career to the next level, you're going to have to do a lot of this stuff on your own. I mean, I talk about couch potato to industry leader, and I think I've gotten to this point because I started this local chapter in South Florida 8 years ago. And I did it because I said yes. And when I went to that general interest meeting and I became the president, I remember on the drive home, I thought to myself, what did I get myself into? And because I've challenged myself and I've made myself uncomfortable and put myself out there, I think that's what has gotten me to the point that I'm at. And don't get me wrong, I've been scared. I've been frightened along the way. I've been very unsure. I may show this confidence, and a lot of times I do have confidence in my ability because little by little I've gotten there. But even doing this presentation, I still get nervous because I go, well, am I going to deliver? Am I going to be adding value? The people that are listening on this call, are they going to be able to walk away and take something back and bring that back into their organization or bring this back in their career so they can benefit and learn? Well, I hope so. And I go, it's important to invest in yourself first. Expect nothing from no one and be willing to work for everything. If you have people that are willing to spoon feed you to help you in your career, feel very blessed. But a lot of it is because you're going to have to do this on your own. And granted, this is not easy, but nothing is easy. And you got to do it in order to get there, in order to continue to work and improve yourself. Lesson number 10, one metric does not make a case. Well, why do I say that? I remember a lot of times I'd go to my team and say, hey, look, I don't think we're performing because of this metric, or I think you need to be doing better. And I agree. I don't think one metric doesn't make a case. And they go, well, sometimes they go, Eddie, well, you rely too much on metrics. And I go, no, that's part of the equation. I use metrics to determine your performance. And it depends It depends on the role that you're at. If you're a service desk analyst, it's easier to look at your performance based on metrics because I can see the number of calls that you answer. I can see the number of incidents that you open. I can look at how detailed you are when you're opening up those incidents, how many you're doing on first call resolution. But I look at metrics as a crime scene investigation. When you're trying to solve a crime, one clue can open it up and you start digging in and you start getting more clues, and that can hopefully help solve your crime. But that's no different than metrics. And let me give you an example. I look at, for a service desk analyst, I look at not ready time. You can call it whatever you want. Productivity, you can call it ready time, what have you. And the reason I look at that key metric to drill down even more, because that metric provides me 5 different things that I can look at to see whether you or our team are performing. It shows if you're not ready time, and I had a goal of less than 2.5 hours a day or less out of an 8.5 hour day. So that's about 70% of your day you need it to be productive. Granted, there are times that you were pulled into meetings, or if you were working on a project, that number would be less. But that allowed you to take your breaks, that allowed you for after-call work, that allowed you to go to the restroom and take your lunch. But I would look at that metric for the following reasons. If my not ready time for the entire team was 2.5 hours or less, these were the benefits that I was gaining. Number 1, my average speed to answer was going to improve because I had people that were ready to take calls. My abandon rate, that was going to go lower because more calls were being answered. More calls were being answered. My service level, it's definitely going to go up. And my potential for customer satisfaction scores was also going to go up because we were answering the calls much quicker and we were hopefully doing more first call resolutions. Here's another example. I'm at an organization now called Scripps Health, and I came in here and they had a lot of data, but they weren't doing much with it. So I came in and I looked at our call volume for 2015. And then I started looking at our abandon rate, and I noticed that Mondays was our worst day. And in most organizations, Monday is your busiest day. But I also noticed that our peak times, we were averaging almost 100 calls an hour between the hours of 8 and 9 in the morning. And our abandon rate was highest on Monday. And then I started looking at our schedule, and I looked at, well, since we run a 24/7, 365-day organization here, we needed to have people off on certain days. But I noticed Monday was the day that we had the most people off. And that didn't make sense. So we started changing some schedules around. And the first time we didn't get it right. We probably had to do 3 schedule changes. And we're probably not done yet. But I looked at that, and then when we finally made those changes, that abandon rate lowered to about 27%. And that was 60 days later. And I know that I think the abandon rate has gone down even more. So I look at that one metric and I start looking at the abandon rate and I go, well, look, I'm able to come into an organization and say, hey, I feel that we can change the schedule. But I couldn't go in there and say, well, I think we need to change it because you have too many people off on Monday. I needed to show them some stats. I needed to show them some data. And it's interesting because once I finally presented this and I put a slide deck together, one of the other individuals goes, oh, well, you just did capacity and demand management. And I go to myself, oh, really? Well, I didn't really think about that, but I did. So those are the things that you look at to make a case. That one metric does not make a case, but you use it to make some decisions within your organization. So here's the last one. Here's a bonus. Let's give it back, pay it forward. So now I think that I've bumped into a bunch of walls along the way in my career, and I've learned a lot. And I feel that this is my time to give back. And I'm fortunate that I feel that I have some knowledge to share. I mean, here's an example. I'm doing this webinar, and hopefully I'm sharing some knowledge. And I think, like I said before, the reason is that I feel that I'm making a difference because when I'm asked to volunteer, I say yes. And if you're ever asked to volunteer, be able to say yes. And a lot of times you're probably going to shake your head and say no. And it's going to take a bunch of time, and you got to figure it out. But in my opinion, I think it's better to give than to receive. And I'm going to share a little bit of a story of why I feel it's worked out well for me. So if I'm going to go back to this first slide, I talk about taking education seriously. I remember when I first started, I said that when I lost my job back in 2000, I didn't have a degree, I didn't have certifications, and I felt that I was not prepared for the job market. Well, since then, I've gotten I got my degree. I got that when I was 40 years old. I've gotten some IDLE certifications and some HDI certifications. I joined networking professional user groups such as HDI and ITSMF, and I felt that I've built my toolbox or my tool belt enough that if I were to ever lose my job again, that I'd ask this question: am I better prepared? And I think I am. So the first time I gave this presentation was in Fusion 15 last year in November. And I asked that same question, and the majority of the people in the audience said yes. So I go back to work, and 2 weeks later, I get called into my conference room. My boss says, "Hey, Eddie, I need to talk to you." And I walk into this conference room, and it's my boss, his boss, and the director of HR. And when I walk in there, I don't think this. I say this out loud. I go, "Oh, this ain't good." And the director of HR put her head down, and I knew something was wrong. And I try not to get emotional when I talk about this because this was difficult. After 10 years at the University of Miami, there was a reorganization and my position was eliminated. This was November 10th, 2015. 2 days later, I was done. I was gone. And I think to myself, what the heck am I going to do now? And that sort of, it sort of shoots, my confidence goes down. I think for anybody that's ever lost their job or you've had something impact your life, your confidence, you always want it to be there, but at times it takes a hit. And I thought to myself, what am I going to do now? And this was in November during the holiday season. It's like, oh, it's hard to find a job, and especially during the holiday season. And it's not like I can reach out to someone, and I've made a lot of contacts within HDI and ITSMF and say, hey, get me a job. It's not that easy. So I thought, okay, well, you know what? I think I'll do okay. And I told my wife that I'm confident I will get a job and things will work out. And 5 weeks later, I get this call from a recruiter out of Alpharetta, Georgia. I call him my angel. His name is Andy Bryan, and he goes, hey, Eddie, I got this role and this position for you that I think you'd be a perfect fit. And every time I talk to a recruiter, that's the first thing that they say. And it's like, okay, I got an organization that needs three things. I go, number one, they need to mature their service desk. I go, I think you can do that. Number two, they're moving from Remedy to ServiceNow. You've done that. I go, yeah, I can do that. Number three, they're moving over to Epic and they need day one support. Epic is an electronic medical record system. And I did that at the University of Miami. He goes, you can do that. I go, yeah, sure. I go, great. We talk about it a little bit more and he goes, well, the only thing about this job, it's a 6-month job and it's in San Diego. And I go, oh my goodness. So I go back home and I talk to my wife and I go, honey, I got this great opportunity. It's in San Diego and doing all these things. And we talk about it. And 5 weeks later, I signed on the dotted line and I started working for Scripps. And it's interesting. I'm here at Scripps now for 8 months, and I'm doing a lot of the same things that I did at the University of Miami. And why do I share this story with you is because I go, number one, I think not only did I take my education seriously, I took my career seriously. And I always said that I give these deposits into a bank and hopefully one day I can cash in. And I was able to cash in. And I'm here only for a certain amount of time. And then I have to go on to my next job. But I feel that with everything that I've learned and all the things that I'm doing, that I think that I'm better prepared. And every time that I get asked to speak, to do these webinars, or to do these presentations, or to speak, I'm humbled because I think to myself, I'm just a guy from Miami that just is doing his thing and doesn't know any better. But little by little, I chip away and I don't give up. And like I said before, if I fail, I just keep going. So the parting question or the call to action I'm going to leave with everybody here on this call is that what are you doing? What are you doing to challenge yourself? What are you doing to put yourself outside the comfort zone? What is it that you're going to do that if one day you wind up in the same position, in the same situation that I am, and you lose your position, are you going to be ready? Are you going to be ready to take that next step? And if not, then what are you waiting for? David and the Northeast New England chapters, I want to thank you for having me on your call here. I'm really humbled, and I want to thank you once again. And here's my contact information, and I don't know if there's any questions that anybody asks or has to ask, but I want to thank you once again for having me to be able to share a little bit of myself with you all today.
Great. Thank you very much, Eddie. That was awesome. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and ask them now, or you can type them into the chat window, and I can ask them for you. We have a couple minutes left, but I just wanted to again thank Eddie. I mean, this is a great presentation, and it's a virtual meeting, so you can't see the standing ovation we're giving you right now. But that was absolutely awesome. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So it looks like don't have any. Don't know what that is.
That's some party music, but that's not for me.
No. Somebody signed off, and I got to figure out. All right. They're back, or they hung up. Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. All right. So if there's no questions, I want to thank Eddie again for his time today, and really appreciate everything he said. His contact information is here. I'm going to have a short survey for you to take at the end of the meeting, and we'll send that around to you and post it at the end of this meeting. It would really help us out a lot to understand what you liked, what you didn't like, and what you would like to see in future meetings. And lots of people in the chat window are saying thank you, Eddie. So I'll also send around Eddie's contact info. Like I said earlier, too, he is the track chair for one of the tracks at the upcoming HDI conference in May of 2017. So if you're interested in participating in that somehow, or you have a presentation you're interested in giving, take a look at the HDI site, and you can find information about submitting for that. I think that's it. So thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon, and appreciate you hopping on at your lunch break today.
All right. Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone.